Israel attacked Qatar, bombed, and they wanted to kill the head of Hamas in Qatar. And we know that the defense system of Qatar didn't do anything. And the United States, what has happened in your opinion? What was the main? Why did the United States? Do you do you feel that the United States informed the government in Qatar and they didn't? They're somehow showing pretending that they didn't know about it.
I think Pepe wants to say something.
I talked to some of my Americans, and they say no, they did not tell Doha.
Yeah.
You
There
know,
you go.
it really doesn't matter. Do you think that if the Americans had told Qatar that it would have made a difference? Or do you think the Qatari government would have informed the leadership of Hamas to stay away from that building? They would have stayed silent and stayed out of it. Qatar, unfortunately, like the Emirates, although they hate each other, like the Saudis, although they hate each other, like the Bahrainis, although they hate each other, they're proxies. The United States has no respect for them. The emperor came to Qatar, he came to the Saudi Arabia, he came to the Emirates, and they all gave him gifts and billions of hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, were promised. Whether they have that money or not, that's a completely different issue. The Qataris gave him a $400 million plane, and what did he do? Nothing. Being a U.S. proxy does not mean that you are safe and secure. Tomorrow, the Israelis can bomb Riyadh and take out Mohammed bin Salman. They can take out the leadership of Qatar. They can take out Mohammed bin Zayed, and no one in Washington will stop them. And these regimes will collapse because they're family dictatorships, they're clans. They will fall apart. In the case of Qatar and the Emirates, they have more indentured servants and slaves, far more indentured servants and slaves than they have citizens. Everything will fall apart. So this just shows, and I personally think that this was a foolish move, and it does not serve the interests of the Israeli regime or the United States. It definitely serves the interests of Netanyahu, just like all the wars have served his interests. But none of the wars have served the interests of the empire or the Israeli regime as a key element or part of that empire, because they have discredited everyone who is associated with the West. Everyone has been discredited now. No one in the Western camp is safe, no matter how obedient they are. Erdogan, by supporting the United States in its dirty wars and its expansionism across the region. Saudi Arabia, decades of supporting the US policy across the board. Qatar doing the same, each in their own different way. The Emirates, none of them are safe. Do you think that the United States is going to sanction the Israeli regime? Do you think the European Union is going to marginalize Netanyahu and the regime tomorrow after what they did to Qatar? Qatar has funded all these politicians, given them lavish gifts. Whenever a senior Western politician goes to Qatar, they go back with enough money to buy an expensive car, at least. At least. They give them golden wristwatches that are pure gold. They buy off everyone as far as they can, as much as they can. But to what purpose? To what's the use? You can be bombed and no one will do anything about it. Not a single air defense system was activated. But the tragic thing is that, does anyone think that the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which hosts CENTCOM, the forward base of CENTCOM, does anyone think that the Qataris are going to ask the Americans to leave? Are the Americans going to be asked to leave anywhere in the Persian Gulf region after this? Of course not. because these are proxy regimes. They do not have popular support. In the Emirates, people support the Palestinian resistance, but the Emirati regime condemns the attack in Jerusalem or in Al-Quds. They've been murdering 100 Palestinians a day in Gaza for 2 years now. And the Emiratis don't put out statements. They only put out a statement when a few Israelis are killed. But that is not going to help them. If the Israeli regime, if and when they decided to make a move against the Emiratis, is any of this going to help them? No, of course not. So this is I think, a very important moment, a historic moment. It is a key moment. Qatar and Erdogan, they did everything possible to help the Americans in this region. And they're, by the way, they're not allies of the resistance. Qatar helped undermine the axis of resistance in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Yemen. Qatari television, Al Jazeera, shows sympathy for Palestine, but it does not fund the resistance. It doesn't help the resistance. And the only reason why Qatar and Turkey host politicians from Hamas is because the Americans let them do that. It's because the Americans think that this way they have a bit of leverage. Because Qatar takes care of Palestinians, they give them good places to stay, they give them funding, and that way the Americans believe that they can create divisions between the political wing and the military wing, which so far has failed. But that has been the objective. If the Americans had told Qatar to get rid of the Hamas offices in Doha, do you think that the Qataris would have said no? Of course not. The same is true in Istanbul. Remember, when Erdogan arrested that pastor, saying that he was involved in the coup, the Americans put a couple of sanctions on Turkey and he kneeled. Erdogan kneeled. And even though he was condemned by Turkish courts in Turkey, Erdogan handed him over to the United States. Do you think if the Americans tell Erdogan to shut down Hamas offices in Turkey that he will say no? Of course not. But this is a lesson learned for people across the world. I'm not talking about the regimes themselves, but people on their payroll, but also ordinary people across the world, that it does not protect you being an agent of the United States, being a proxy of the United States, or if I want to be more kind about it, being, let's say, an ally of the United States, even though none of these countries are allies of the United States, they're all proxies. So in my opinion, Netanyahu has severely damaged the United States. And it has an impact in Iran, a huge impact. The last 2 years have been a learning process for many people in Iran, for the liberals and the youth. The Holocaust in Gaza, then the unprovoked and illegal war, the blitzkrieg that took place as Iran was negotiating. And then even liberals in the West and the Europeans who opposed Trump, they were all supporting this aggression. And the International Atomic Energy Agency lied in order to facilitate the attack and never condemned it. This was all a learning process. But now, the final argument that liberals in Iran make is that if we just change our behavior towards the United States, we will have security. What can Iran do that Qatar hasn't done?
Yeah.
The perfect obedient slave. It has no protection. So this only strengthens the argument put forth by Imam Khomeini and Ayatollah Khamenei after him, that You cannot trust the United States, you cannot trust the empire, and you have to remain steadfast. And you have to be uncompromising on your principles because the empire is ruthless and it is evil. There's nothing else to take out of this, Nima. There's no way for the Americans to make sense of this for the people across the world. The Americans could have stopped this. There's no doubt that the Americans were involved. The latest ceasefire proposal was given, in my opinion, by the Americans so that the Israelis could carry out this operation. And the Qatari regime, according to CNN, I tweeted this minutes before the attack. CNN had said that Qatar is putting pressure on Hamas to accept the American proposal. So I'm not saying Qatar was involved in the assassination, but they were part of this process to bring these people together. So, and then the Americans would give the green light for the Israeli regime to attack. It's sort of like what happened to Iran. Of course, Iran knew that the Israeli regime was going to attack. I even knew about it from people that they were.
You
we were
told
about
me.
to be
You
attacked.
told me during the program that Israel gonna attack.
Yeah. So, but in any case, the Iranians knew. The Iranians miscalculated in the sense that they didn't think that they were going to go after the leadership. They thought that they were going to attack bases and the nuclear program, and they didn't think they were going to try to carry out a regime change operation, as they call it in the West. But in any case, the Iranians were negotiating. Indirect negotiations were taking place with the Americans as they were conspiring against Iran. And in the case of Qatar, the same thing. Hamas was carrying out ceasefire negotiations when they were attacked by the Israelis with American support. You cannot negotiate with Americans. You cannot negotiate with the Israeli regime for sure. I think this was a catastrophic mistake and miscalculation by the Israeli regime. But again, this serves the interests of Netanyahu and his fanatical allies. But for Israel, it is, I think, catastrophic. For the United States, it is definitely a catastrophic mistake.
Yeah. Pepe, you may add to what Professor Marandi said, but it seems that the attack has failed.
Oh,
And
sorry.
the leader of
After
Hamas.
I just want to exterminate myself, after all that. This is beyond depressing on a cosmic level. Brilliant explanation. There's nothing to add. Okay, question. I'm going to change the subject completely. I'm not in the mood to talk about something that incites us to commit suicide, which is the situation, considering that I came from an extraordinary dinner here in Beijing and I am in a total Chinese mood, but Chinese metaphors escape me to say what we should do about this Zionist bunch. And I prefer not to say it live, but you have a pretty good idea what I would say about it. So once again, I'm drinking to my friend Mao, and I'm going to change the subject to talk something auspicious, at least.
Just before you begin, Pepe, can I just add one thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Professor Marandi.
Because after the Pepe changes the topic, I'll probably be discussing whatever it is that Pepe wants to discuss.
Okay.
I actually think that, and I have to put my words carefully. I have to put my sentences together carefully. I actually think that hopefully no one was martyred. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
We've seen different reports. Obviously, the leader of Hamas, he is a steadfast person, and they want him out. I don't want to go into much detail what the calculations of the Israeli regime are, because maybe they may be trying to take out certain people in the leadership of the political wing of Hamas, and not everyone. They want to change the sort of balance in the political leadership of Hamas. I don't know what their objective is. But there are many different things that you can think of. But I think at the end of the day, ultimately, this strengthens the resistance. This strengthens the axis of resistance, because the logic of the axis of resistance is clear as day for those who want to keep their eyes open, who want to have open eyes. Those who want to, keep their eyes closed and keep them shut. Those people, those intellectuals on the payroll, those religious and cultural centers funded by these regimes in NATO or in the Persian Gulf region. If they want to keep their eyes closed, they can keep it closed. But for everyone else, this is an eye opener. The dirty war in Syria, we saw what happened. We see the regime in the American camp. All of this awakens people to the reality that the only real way forward is the path chosen by the axis of resistance. Everything else is nonsense. Everything else is fake. Everything else is appeasement, and everything else weakens the region and strengthens Zionism and the empire. And I think that being as a servant, an agent, a proxy of the United States, a perfect proxy, and yet being battered this way is an eye opener for many people. People can no longer keep their eyes shut, whether they're working for Qatar in London, or working for the Saudis in Africa, or working for the Emiratis in the Sudan or anywhere else. They are seeing the reality of being a Western proxy and the results of it evolving in front of their eyes. I think that in reality, the martyrdom of people aside, the potential martyrdom of people aside, I think that this hurts the Israeli regime.